Hello, 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 and welcome to this amazing conversation we are about to have about the leadership of Black women in social movements, in the social sector, and beyond. I am Dr. Danielle Moss. I will be your moderator and host. I'm looking forward to an incredible conversation. My guests tonight are Ngozi Okaro, who is the founder and CEO of Custom Collaborative. And we will also be joined by Ms. Arva, who is the president and CEO of the New York Urban League. So thank you so much, Ngozi, for being a part of this conversation. I feel like this is a conversation we have had so often offline. And so now we are inviting other folks in to hear what we have to say about the incredible importance that Black women have played in terms of moving social movements in this country. So thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Moss. Thank you for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here talking about Black women's contributions and leadership during Black History Month. And so the next month is Women's History Month. So it all comes together. Super.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a twofer. So before we get started, can you tell us what is Custom Collaborative? What spurred you to found this amazing organization? For those of you who don't know, Ngozi was recently featured in Times Square. So she is doing incredible work. So introduce the people to Custom Collaborative.
Yes, gladly. So Custom Collaborative is a nonprofit social enterprise that supports no and low income and immigrant women develop careers in sustainable fashion. So sustainable fashion meaning environmentally sustainable and living wage work. We are located in two locations in northern Manhattan, one on the east side, one on the west side. We've got 3 programs, a training program, a business incubator, and a cooperative development arm. And again, all of our work is in support of helping women find dignified work that they enjoy in the fashion industry. And yes, we will be in Times Square. The 3 billboards in Times Square go up tomorrow, and then we'll also have a billboard by the United Nations and another one downtown by Spring Studios, which coincides with New York Fashion Week. All the shows will be there. So I'm so excited to be there and to be able to talk about sustainable fashion and women's issues and people of color issues in the world. Garment workers, 80% of them are Black and brown people. So this is really important to us as people. And historically, we've always been involved in fashion.
So you are a bomb attorney. What got you into fashion?
Well, 2 things. One, I have always felt that a primary way I could express myself is through my clothing, right? Our clothes, our appearance is the first way that we tell people who we are. And another reason is because I'm a taller person, which means for me, I either have to buy clothes off the rack and have them altered, or I can have clothes made. And for me, I had clothes made. And the woman who was my dressmaker really is who inspired me to start Custom Collaborative.
So, I have not necessarily been a part of an organization that I founded. What does it take to take an idea and really make it a living, breathing organization? What was involved in your journey?
A That's a great question. A lot of self-talk telling myself no, that this didn't need to happen, right? So there was a lot of, oh, I've been in nonprofit for 15 years. I know that there are so many organizations who do so many things, and I don't need to add on. And in fact, there was no other organization doing what Custom Collaborative does. There were organizations teaching women how to do construction work with the idea that that could pay them a lot of money. Everybody's not into construction. Some people culturally, it's not appropriate for women to be in those types of fields. And I also felt like the only reason that fashion jobs pay lower than construction jobs is because women do fashion jobs and men mainly do construction jobs. And so that seemed to me to be like a false story. So that was part of the genesis. But I think the originally I had an idea, and I guess I talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And I had a really great mentor, Dennis Derrick, and he said, "Well, where's your concept paper?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, you keep talking about this thing. It has to be written down in order for anybody to give you feedback or to really understand." And so then I wrote it down. And I think writing down my ideas and then fleshing it out, seeing if it made sense to me, if it made sense to others, really is what got me started. And it really helped also when I was fundraising to be able to give people a piece of paper and say, this is what I want to do. This is where I think we will be in 3 years. This is how many people it will affect, and this is how much it will cost.
So, there is a lot of conversation in the philanthropic community about the underinvestment of philanthropy in people of color led organizations. Um, and I definitely have had my own experiences as a fundraiser. So, what do you think it was that compelled folks to say, you know what, we are going to put our dollars where our mouths are and invest in your idea?
Well, there were, um, I would say the people around me believed in it. And coming from a relatively privileged background, right? Like both of my parents are college graduates. I went to graduate school. So I knew some people with some money. So I knew that once I got something rolling, I would be able to talk to those people. So one of your later guest, Arva Rice, actually introduced me to this amazing woman, Willa Shallot. And I was talking to her about it. This is at our first meeting. And she reaches out across the table to shake my hand and says, like, okay, how can I support? Right. And I had just told her the story for about, 15 or 20 minutes. And so then that outside validation from this woman who was a known quantity to someone, but not to me, really made me say, like, okay, this is going to work. I had said to her, oh, we have an anonymous donor who will match gifts in increments of $2,500 and up. The anonymous donor was me. But I knew that I could like leverage that money to get
Right.
other people to sign on. Our second donor was New York Women's Foundation, told them the same story. We've got this anonymous donor who will match gifts. And so New York Women's Foundation got together with Eileen Fisher, the company, and put in $5,000, which means I had to put in $5,000. So it was really about um, me just thinking creatively, thinking with friends about how to make it happen. And fundraising, frankly, was slower than I thought it would be. Um, our first year, I think we had a $80,000 budget. I thought by the second year it would be at least $200,000. It was not. And I couldn't figure it out, right? I've been a professional fundraiser. I knew what to say and what to do. So it was a challenge getting folks outside to get it and to see me and to see my vision for these women and for this organization beyond seeing me.
So what I'm taking away from this, hey Arva,
Hello, ladies.
Hey,
just for the
hey.
audience, we're all friends, so it's going to be a real cozy conversation. But so Ngozi, what I'm hearing you say is you have the vision, you write it down, you enrolled other people in your vision, you put some skin in the game, right? That was like that matching joint was pretty fierce. I'm also really excited to hear about the role of the New York Women's Foundation. Shout out to our other friend, Ana Oliveira. I happen to sit on the board of the New York Women's Foundation, and they are one of the few foundations that will invest at, the very beginning of good ideas that come from women who look like the folks on this call right now. So I hope people are paying attention, right? There's a recipe. If you have a good idea and you keep it to yourself, there's no way for other people to help you. So it sounds like you shared your vision with Arva, who also provided some introductions, because she's bomb too. So when did you know that you were going to be a leader? right? At what point did that happen in your life? Like, I've been thinking about this a lot, right? We're telling our leadership stories from the point of someone else giving us a job, but actually the foundation for what it means to lead in community often happens way before that. So, when did Black girl magic start for you, Ngozi?
I mean, I I don't even know if I have an answer to that question. I will say that when I was 6, somebody told me, "Little girl, you talk a lot. You should be a lawyer." I was like, "Okay, okay." And so then maybe that was some leadership right there. And then I think another thing was when I was in school, in elementary school, definitely in kindergarten. I was there for 3 days. They moved me to 1st grade, but I think I would, like, answer the questions, and probably I was telling other people the answers and telling them what to do. So I've always been curious. Um, I know that I was a leader in high school and in college, and I think that when I even my first jobs, I was a leader, right? So I started as in a management training program at a retail chain, and I was started as assistant manager, and then I had another job, and when the boss would go away, she would put me in charge of our 8-member team, and this is all before I went to law school, so I was, like, younger than 23, and then something happened where I got the message that I wasn't a leader, and I wasn't smart enough, and I wasn't good enough, um, and that was very disorienting, and then
Mhm.
at some point, I believed it. And then I had to figure out how to unbelieve it and realize who I am regardless of who people wanted to think I am, right? Like, you want me to be quiet and you wanna dismiss me, but then you're taking my ideas and presenting them off as your own,
Mm,
right? So there's that's probably another show. We might all have some of
right.
those same types of experiences.
Good,
Mhm.
good point. Arva, can I ask you the same question? When did little Black girl Arva uh, start her magic journey, her magical journey?
Well, good evening, ladies. It's wonderful to see you. And I love the response that you had in Ngozi because I had a very similar life experience. And my mother loves to tell the story about how the preschool instructor at the school called my mom and said, "You can continue to bring your daughter here, but I honestly think you're wasting your money. She's tying everyone else's shoelaces and she's telling everybody else what to do. And so I don't think she needs to be in this preschool any longer." And I'm telling you, this is my mother's favorite story. So I started out being assertive. We want to use that word. I started out showing some leadership skills, wanting to get the other children on track with doing their bunny ears and getting their shoes laced. So that was my first foray into leadership. And I remember when I got the position at the New York Urban League, I got a card from my mom and dad, and it said, "Congratulations, boss. You're finally getting paid for what you've been doing all your life." My leadership journey started out pretty early. I started teaching Sunday school when I believe I was in 8th grade. And so I started to teach the little ones then. And I taught something called Vacation Bible School during the summer, and I had
Yep.
25 little kids in my class, and people didn't expect, for whatever reason, enrollment that year was higher than they had thought. So literally there's this, little Black girl with this like line of little kids following her teaching Vacation Bible School. And so ever since then, I've been in the process of trying to get people to meet and reach their goals.
As I'm listening to both of you talk about your leadership journeys, I'm thinking about the fact that Black communities do such a good job of empowering us and making us think that we can climb every mountain. Um, and and then when Ngozi talked about the fact that it's almost like then you go out into the world and people are trying to minimize all of that armor that your community and your family have imbued you with. I think it is very disconcerting and very disarming for sure.
Mhm.
I don't know when my little Black girl magic journey started, I would say that I started my education at a Black nationalist nursery school called the Liberation School in New Brunswick, New Jersey. My mother was a research librarian at Rutgers at that time. And then when we aged out of the Liberation School, a group of folks got together and started a school called Nairi Education Institute. And, I had this conversation with my dissertation advisor at Teachers College about, the value of, what was a Black nationalist education during those formative years. And I think people hear that and they think it's anti-white. It was not anti-white. Like, we just didn't really spend a whole lot of time talking about white folks, actually. It was really about centering the history, the contributions, the lives, the vibrancy of Black communities. Almost like they knew that we would face challenges after that experience, and they wanted us to have armor, really, to reinforce, who we are and what we're capable of. I think one of the things we all have in common is we like to talk. I would definitely say I was always, that was some consistent feedback throughout my K-12 education, like, good student, talks a lot. And I don't know if I saw myself as a leader or other people just positioned me in some cases, particularly in those years. It was like, oh, you want to do XYZ? Oh, I think you should be in charge of XYZ. Always kind of feeling a little bit undeserving or underprepared. Like, why did they, pick me? Still sometimes battling with that imposter syndrome. So what role has imposter syndrome played in your journeys?
Ooh. Ngozi, go take that one first.
I feel like somebody should have sent me the questions in advance. In a therapy session, right? I mean, literally, I did not experience that until I went to law school. Like, I went to law school knowing that I was a good writer. I knew I was a good reader. My biggest claim to fame until tomorrow when that billboard goes up is that I won the countywide readathon in the 4th grade, right? So I think that when I went to law school, and there's a specific way of legal writing that is taught, and I thought, okay, well then I'm just a B writer, which I had never been a B writer. And I said, okay, well, I'm actually a very good editor. And so I'll be the editor. I don't need to be the writer. So I think that was one thing. And then I think I started working in law firms, large law firms, which were pretty much not set up for Black people, for Black women to succeed. And like many other white institutions, look down on and think less of and have certain diminished expectations of Black people, even if they do have a law degree from Georgetown, right? So I think at that point, maybe that's when I got it. I mean, I'm fortunate that I only practiced law in law firms for 5 years, because when I was 6 and somebody told me I talk a lot and I should be a lawyer, and I found out what lawyers did, I was like, oh, you help women and children and people who have Pinto cars that set on fire. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to be. And so then as I was at the law firm, realizing that what I was doing wasn't what I was called to do. And I got myself together to leave, and I figured, well, I'll be able to do something. And then when I started doing my own thing, when I started working in nonprofit and using my brain to make them better and to innovate, that's helped me get my confidence back. But every once in a while, it still comes up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that there's a young person listening to us right now, and they're like, wait a minute. Sis has a law degree from Georgetown, and she left a white shoe law firm to do nonprofit work. How do you make those choices, right? Obviously, you were on a much more lucrative career track in the beginning. What's the calculus to kind of getting to the point where money isn't necessarily the goal, but impact is the goal?
I mean, for me, I think the reason that I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 6, like, I didn't understand anything about money. Well, I knew that my mother would give me money to go to buy candy, right? But like the thing of like, oh, lawyers make a lot of money, I had no idea. But for me, it was always about justice. And even the type of law that I wanted to do was about justice. When I got into law school, I realized that there was no way I would be able to pay for my law school loans and do the work that I wanted to do. And I am and always have been a believer in Christ and a believer in my value. So I knew that I would be okay. And then I also had this very smart friend. And I said, well, what if, I leave the practice of law and I don't get a job? And she said, you should be so lucky as to never have a job for the rest of your life. Right. So some of it is like people saying things to you that really free you. I mean, I also did get this book that says, what do you do with a law degree if you're not going to be a lawyer? Because I did have people in my family who were like, well, if you're not going to be a lawyer, what are you going to do? Your law degree has gone to waste, blah, 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 blah. And that's just noise, right? Because I knew that after working these 18-hour days and having to get up and do it again, I wasn't happy. I couldn't look in the mirror and say, I'm so excited about this work that I'm doing. It was a very personal process that I had to go through, and it was about my faith and about my core, and also my remembering that I was still smart.
Can I go back to what you were saying, Danielle, about imposter syndrome? Because that just hits me at the very core. And I think that where Ngozi left, I think is so important, that with imposter syndrome, you can take it off your shoulder, you can put it on the side, but it's a bag that you continue to just keep picking up at different points along in your journey. And I found that for a while, I would get frustrated with myself. I would say, you've done this, you've spoken here, you've had these various accomplishments. Why can't you put that bag down for good, right? But I finally came to the notion that whenever I stretch myself, whenever I'm going to the next level, I find myself reaching for the bag again, right? Reaching for that. I'm not sure if I have all that it takes. Why did I get selected for this? That kind of that question mark that comes with being incredible African-American women, but we still have that little bit of a question mark. And I wanted to share this very quick story with you and with the listeners, is that when I went to college, I went to Northwestern, which is, pseudo Ivy League school in the Midwest, very, very competitive. And when I got there, I was one of the smart kids in school. So I got there thinking I'm one of the smart kids. Well, when you walk into a campus like Northwestern, everyone is the smart kid, right? And so I kind of was like, how do I define myself in the sea of everybody being the smart kid? And in addition to being the smart kid, these kids had gone to places where they took AP classes. And so they were the smart of the smart. And I was just like, whoa, what is this? And, I was very discombobulated about that. And I know that Danielle works very hard with young people to make sure that they're ready for their college experience. Well, I hadn't gone through all of her, so I wasn't as ready. And so I got on campus, was trying to define myself. I go to this class, and my professor looks at my paper and says, you wrote this paper? And I said, yeah. He goes, how did you get into this school? You can't write. I was devastated. Northwestern is a pretty large campus. And I remember almost running in order that I could get back to my dorm room and shut my door, because before I could even get the door closed, the tears were running down my face. And in that moment, the imposter syndrome was larger than life. He's right. How did I get to the school? He's right. I can't write. I can't, walk with the big dogs. And it was through the encouragement and support of friends, family, definitely my mom coming in and supporting me, was able to get through school and graduated on the honor roll. But in those moments, that the bag, the insecurity imposter bag, was a garbage bag. It was so full. And at other times, it's a little small cute bag, but it's something that I always carry with me.
I wonder how much of that imposter syndrome grows out of a real self-reflection about whether or not we belong where we are, or how much of that imposter syndrome is really mirroring back America's low expectations of us simply because of who we are. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think teachers are the most powerful people in the world, right? So people have two stories about school, I like to believe. They have, if they're lucky, the story about the teacher who believed in them unquestioningly, and spoke just life and possibility into their lives. And then they also have those educators, like that professor who, had a moment where he could have said, listen, there are some resources to help you get your writing up to snuff. I like your concepts. I like the thinking that went into you putting that paper together. Or, they use it as an opportunity to kind of weed out the students who they think don't belong in those spaces. So I kind of think that, as I think about it from that lens, I think a lot of times the moments when I've questioned myself the most grew out of other people's fear of who I could become or how I could show up. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that interaction had been different, do you think that the imposter syndrome would have set in the way that it did? Or, how much of it is us kind of like mirroring back people's low expectations?
Talk about it.
So she's asking Arva a question, and I want to recharacterize that. I just want us to think about this. Is it society's low expectations, or is it their fear?
Right. Is it a fear of who we can become?
Ooh.
Or do they really have low expectations? I think it's both. I think, we have gotten, even as Black women, we've gotten a steady diet of anti-Blackness from the time that we were aware of ourselves.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? No matter how much my mother tried to shield me from that, right? I still had those moments where I was exposed to popular culture in America, right? Which is, I think the expanse of popular culture is much more inclusive of us, and in some ways it centers Black women in every way. Like, you look at TikTok, if you look at Twitter, Black Twitter, all of our slang and, all of those kinds of things. But yeah, I think now I'm looking at the comments.
I think it's and. I think you're right.
I think it's and. I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's both. I think we learn to be hard on ourselves. I recently made a post on LinkedIn about my grandmother, and her life as a domestic, her first domestic job at 8 years old. Like, who's out here hiring 8-year-olds, right? That's another conversation.
Right.
But also, like, that determination when there was no example of anything else being possible, just instinctively and intuitively, her, tenacity in terms of, like, I'm going to be a homeowner in Washington, D.C. If I have to work 3 jobs and sleep 4 hours a night for the next 25 years, that's what I'm going to do. And then, to think about the fact that, look at what we have accomplished in so many Black families in a generation or two. Right. So when we talk about this, this American dream and this drive, we almost undersell, what Black Americans have done on this soil for themselves and their children and their grandchildren, and the sacrifices that were made. And I remember last year during the pandemic, Nikki Giovanni and Angela Davis were talking, and Angela Davis was like, listen, we talk about Dr. King and that bus boycott, but that was hundreds of Black women, domestic workers who took an L and walked to work for well over a year,
Exactly.
to make that boycott possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's like the political strategizing and the organizing on one side, but there's also the like sacrificing your very body to a movement that you didn't know whether or not you were going to be the beneficiary of some of the progress that kind of came out of that movement. So, we really are our ancestors' wildest dreams. I think about my grandmother coming to my graduation at Swarthmore College and just like looking at that campus and thinking about her own journey and the fact like, this is happening and I'm here to really be a part of it and enjoy it. And that kind of like drive is often attributed to other groups within the BIPOC community. It's attributed often as an immigrant story. And, I can't stand to hear people say, well, how come Black people aren't doing for themselves? And it's just like, my father was picking cotton in the summer in North Carolina when he was growing up.
Okay.
Right? This is, I got a doctorate from Columbia. Like, what more can I give you?
Right.
In a generation. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Wow.
So, this sometimes you do have to stand back a little bit and give yourself the credit, even when there's no one else in the stands cheering you on. I think that's the hard part. You guys heard me talk about the fact that I was in another a more diverse conversation, and someone who doesn't share our experience was saying like, no, I haven't had any obstacles professionally. like I didn't know that was a thing, you know.
And the only reason I know is you told me. If you hadn't said it, and if I didn't know you to be a truth teller,
right,
there's no such thing. Because everybody who I've come across now, every Black woman, I'm like, guess what? I heard, and people can't believe it. Like, people cannot believe it.
Yeah, literally in disbelief.
It's just like, wow, you had a great idea at work, and people immediately, wanted to invest in your idea, to give you credit for your idea, to expand your idea and make sure that you were a part of that. Like, nope. Like, I feel like I have literally had to fight for everything I've ever gotten. And, we talk about the fact that I don't know about y'all, but I'm seriously tired. So how do you guys, if you have experienced similar exhaustion, how do you handle that? How do you keep going? Where does your strength come from?
I'll take this one first. My strength comes from two places. It's interesting because it's the youth and the longevity that motivate me. So I run the New York Urban League, and we are a longtime civil rights organization focusing in on education, employment, and housing and healthcare around the country. And here in New York, we focus on education, employment, and advocacy. And one of the pillars of the Urban League is, or one of the support groups is our Young Professionals, which is an affinity group of the Urban League. And the young professionals have jobs in other places. So they work in education, and they work on Wall Street, and they work in in healthcare. So they're working all day, every day, but they come together and they serve as a volunteer arm of the Urban League, volunteering over 15,000 hours of community service to the Urban League. And so when I see this group of young people who could be doing anything that they want to in the world, and let's be clear, our young folks today, they're out there, looking fabulous and their Instagram accounts, and they live in their best lives. And the fact that they stop in all of that to come and to be mentors to the young people in our programs, to staff our historically Black college and university fair, to put together our State of Young Black New York conference every year, that brings me hope that the next generation sees the value of a long-term legacy organization and sees their responsibility and understands we are our grandmother's dreams and they're their great grandmother's dreams. And they see that the privilege that they have isn't something that they just woke up to. Reverend Sharpton talks about how he was in a kind of a tough conversation with somebody, and they're saying, I don't believe in you. I don't believe in the work that you do. I just fill out my resume, I hand it in, and people look at my resume, and that's how I get called into the interview. And Reverend Sharpton responded and said, it's because of the work that I do that they look at your resume. And so I think that that's one side of the work, is being inspired by the young people. On the other side, I mentioned being in the civil rights space. And so Hazel Dukes is going to be turning 90 this year. And she is the state head of the NAACP. And I'll go to a meeting and I'll see Hazel, and Hazel will come running in because she was at 2 meetings before I was coming to my first meeting of the day. And so I'm like, if Hazel is still coming to meetings and she's still out there working in the housing projects, and she's still out here in communities, and she's done it for this length of time, how can I complain about the years that I've spent? Now, granted, we can talk later about making sure that we take care of ourselves and making sure that we are ready to pour out our cup. But it's the young folks and the older folks that keep me inspired.
And Ngozi, what keeps you inspired?
Well, first of all, you two, women like you, who are really doing it, right? And also who I can see as models, get advice from, have a drink with, like definitely that. And then we can chart the path. We can chart the progress that we've made. We can talk about the ideas that we have that will continue to make this a better place for all of us. So definitely that. Just like that there's more to come, and it's going to get better, and that the moment might feel difficult, but if you look on the horizon, things will be better and are improving. So then definitely that. And also I would say, similar to both of you, like my ancestral stories, right? So it's my family. What did my family come through to get me where I am? I know that my grandmother, even though she is not here on this earth, she's still praying and looking over me, and I want to make her proud. And at the same time, I have a 1-year-old nephew who I want to continue to make the world better for. Ever since he was born, I think about, oh my gosh, what if he is stopped on I-95 driving when he gets old enough? What if he is stopped and frisked? And so all of that makes me remember that I need to continue to push for justice, not just for him, but for others. But it puts it in a very real package when I'm holding him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, ditto on everything that you both said. Obviously, Oliver Scholars is an organization committed to helping high potential young people really reach their full expanse potential. And just watching them come from public schools where their academic abilities are largely overlooked. Most of our students are not already in gifted and talented programs, even though, based on what we see, there's a lot that could be done to diversify who is classified as high potential students in our public schools. But I think the other thing that keeps me going is this amazing community of activists, truth tellers, educators, advocates. I have just met some amazing, super smart people, like the two of y'all, through this career in the nonprofit sector. And I can't imagine being in a space professionally, where we couldn't grapple with these ideas and these challenges and continue to kind of like reinvent and reimagine what our communities can look like, and what our communities deserve. And I think at this season, I'm really understanding that this is not a sprint. This is a leisurely marathon. You know, I did a half marathon a couple of years ago. I know it's hard to believe.
Wow.
But, one of the things was, right, sometimes I was like doing my little jog, and a lot of times I was just like walking. And I have to say a funny story about that half marathon that nearly killed me, because I'm, not necessarily a runner, but my aunt was, my mother's sister, Andrea. And I got to a place at like 110th Street in Central Park West when I said, if I leave this park right now, will anybody actually know that I dropped out? And just as I was thinking about it, up popped my aunt with a banana. She was like, do not give up. I was like, how did you, like, were you in my head? And she was like, here's a snack, here's some water, keep going. And I feel like my career in the nonprofit sector has been a lot like that. Like, just when I want to sneak out the park and say, I don't have to put up with this crap anymore. Arva and Ngozi, any one of the other amazing women that I've met along this journey will be like, nah, sis, we still have some stuff to do. You can take a break, have yourself a banana, but we have to keep going. So why do you guys think that Black women have been so critical in terms of social movements in this country? I feel like what Malcolm X said is true, like least respected, least protected. But really, to me, I can't think of any social movement that helped progress our country where, we weren't pulling strings to some extent. We see that amplified with, Stacey Abrams' impact on politics recently. But this is not a new thing for us as a country. So how is it that whenever we get involved, everybody wins? Sometimes even when we don't win.
Yeah, I have to say, I remember finding out the story of Diane Nash because I didn't grow up with it. I heard about Martin Luther King. I heard more about the traditional story. And it wasn't until I was to full adulthood that I found out the incredible role that Diane Nash had with the sit-ins, and the fact that she'd come from the North, and the fact that they tried to do the sit-ins sorry. Oh, sorry. I thought I heard something. So that the students at Fisk had organized in order to do the work that they did around the sit-ins, and the fact that Robert Kennedy said, who the F is Diane Nash? And I was like, how awesome and amazing is that you're a college student and the Attorney General for the country is asking who you are, who's the person who will not relent, who will not back down, who is working so hard, organizing in order to put together the lunch strike. And I just think that the work that she did was just so amazing, and hearing about her was inspirational in a way that was different than being inspired by Dr. King. That was even different than being inspired by Malcolm X. This was this young woman who just had such incredible impact. And I think that that's what we continue to do. And I think it's that we take a stance where we're actually dissecting things. Danielle, you talked about how the march wasn't the march wasn't just about not sitting down one day, but the bus boycott was the days and days and months that women had to get organized in order to get to work, right? And I feel like women can just stay in it for the long haul, organize it in such a way that it's just incredible. And I think that we continue to have that incredible role and impact in any movement that moves Black folks forward.
I love that. I love that, Arva. I agree with everything that Arva says. And I also think that because of our subject positioning, right, in this country where we would be positioned as women lower and as Black people lower. So we're at the bottom and we can see up and see what pieces need to be moved around to make this all work, right? I just sent my nieces a Harriet Tubman crossword puzzle. When we think about Harriet Tubman, enslaved, disabled, but still determined and knew that there was a way not just to save herself and to save her family and to save her friends, but actually to save and better the country. So she was an activist with her feet. And I think it is, definitely because of her positioning as a Black woman that she could see what was wrong and figure out how to try and fix it. And even if that meant death, right? And so I
Mhm.
just think that it is not necessarily part of our DNA because that doesn't give us credit, right? But it is about us, about our visioning of justice that we are able to continually fight and fight for others, even if those others don't appreciate it. That doesn't really even matter. We know we're doing the right thing.
Mhm.
What do you hope for Black women going forward?
Mm. Ooh, that question gives me chills.
Joy.
Yeah.
What about joy? I hope that Black women can experience unbridled joy. Arva?
Mm. I would say equality, that they get the last of their cents on a dollar. Stop making, what is
What
it,
are we at?
60?
68 cents
Yeah,
on the
I was going
dollar?
to say
I
68
want the
cents.
rest of my
I
money,
hope they get,
first of all,
I hope they get their 32 cents.
So
Absolutely.
in
And
my lifetime.
right, in our lifetimes, and that they're able to manage that bag of insecurity, or that, that bag of others saying what they can't do, the voice that sometimes creeps into our own heads, but they're able to, just manage it. They know it's there, put it over there on the shelf, I got you. But that they're able to really step into and be able to fully shine.
I
Danielle,
want,
tell us what you think. What do you want for Black women?
yeah, I want freedom.
Mm,
Mm.
I
mm,
want,
ooh,
when I say freedom, I've been thinking about this, right? Like having this life that is been almost always centered on issues of social justice, even as a high school student, even as a college student. And obviously, I don't have any regrets where that's concerned. But I also sometimes wonder now, like, what did I miss out on? What did I not get to explore, learn,
Mm. Mm.
play with, enjoy, because the circumstances of my life required me, in many ways, to be focused on issues of social justice. Like, what if I just, like, I don't know, want to go to the park and smell some flowers and not have to think about, you know, oh, is somebody going to call the cops and pretend like I'm a threat? you
Mm.
know, um, you know, just the idea of like, what does freedom really mean? One of the things I love about what I'm seeing on social media, y'all know I love some TikTok, is this idea of, younger Black women just reinventing, like doing not Black people stuff. I was going to say another word, right? So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a girl who like gave up her job. She bought an RV and, she's living out of her RV. Like, that's not what you're thinking of, at least when I was coming up, of like a Black girl thing to do, you know,
Mm.
or like, organic farming, or, all these things that we have a right to embrace the fullness of everything that life has to offer us, to have a bucket list and make it real and make it livable and lean into all these other things, and spaces that people have not always given us access to. I remember having this conversation with my mom about my father's side of the family. My dad grew up in Jim Crow, Washington, D.C., right? We don't think of D.C. as the South, but it was very much the South. Um,
Mhm.
and the fact that, as someone who grew up in New York in an immigrant family, like they just thought they belonged everywhere, right? So, you know, I grew up going to the theater and going to museums and going to the symphony, whereas like my grandmother wouldn't set foot in a lot of cultural institutions in DC. And I think it was misinterpreted as like her not being cultured, right? Or not having an interest in those kinds of things. And I was like, for her whole life, you know, she was told, no, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. So now you want her to roll in, and she's like, no, I don't care anymore. Right? I don't want to be in that space. I'm not going to the Smithsonian. And so just like remembering the kind of context and the impact that those years had. And I think the reason I talk about my grandmother so much is because she actually shared her story, which was not, you know, necessarily common. My grandfather came up north from North Carolina at like 20. He stopped in DC and met her, and then they came up together. But he never wanted to talk about his life in the South. And he rarely wanted to go below 125th Street. Right? He was on 156 between Broadway and Amsterdam. And, you know, growing up, I thought that was weird. But then I said, you know, God only knows what he saw in North Carolina growing up in Jim Crow. And so I realized there was an intentionality about, I don't want to have to explain myself. I don't want to have to justify myself. I want to move freely in my community and away from harm. And, you know, for him, that meant you don't go below 125th Street unless there was like something really happening. Like if he had an appointment and, you know, had to get dressed up to go downtown, and it was a big deal. But a lot of that is, you know, to me, in retrospect, remnants of having grown up in segregation and just, you know, crafting a life that was livable, you know, where you weren't constantly reminded of your otherness. And yeah, that gave me a whole new perspective in terms of how I think about how we have had to live our lives. And, you know, I remember I took a group of young people to Belfast, and, you know, we were looking at all the peace walls, right, to separate the Catholics from the Protestants. And one of our kids was like, you know what? We don't have walls, but if I go in a store on the Upper East Side, I know that I'm not welcome there. Right. So we don't have a physical wall, but we know what neighborhoods not to go in.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, so that kind of superiority about like, oh my God, I can't believe they're separating the people. Yeah, y'all do. We do that here in New York City in 2022. We do. The kids know.
They certainly do.
So we have just a few minutes left because I knew this would be a free-flowing conversation of love. What would you tell to young women, young Black women, about you know, what do you wish that you had done differently? That if you could give this piece of advice to a young Black woman, you think it would be incredibly useful?
You ready?
I mean, is there enough time? You said that we have like 10 minutes left. I mean,
yeah, we have like three minutes.
Don't sweat him.
Oh.
Period. That's it, right?
That's it. That's it. That's all you got. Okay.
So that's all on that topic, right?
That's all on that topic. Okay. Okay. I try not to live with regrets. The things that I would share with young women is to forgive yourselves. The only people that don't make mistakes are people that aren't doing anything. And the other thing that I would do is to challenge yourself. The only thing that if I could do differently is I would have done a year abroad. But I was too, hesitant to leave my mom, to leave my family, to, try to get a passport, all those other sorts of things. But leadership is about doing things that make your stomach hurt. So, talk to somebody that you wouldn't normally talk to, take a class that you wouldn't take, and also talk to a woman that you admire from afar, because trust me, they still got their insecurity bag and they would love to be able to have a conversation with you.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really great, Arva. I really like that. I think that I would also say, in the same vein that you said about be kind to yourself, understand
Mhm.
that when you are in your 20s, in your 30s, and your teens, of course, you are becoming a person. And so there are things that I would probably look back on and be aghast and be like, oh, I said that to this person. Oh, I did this thing. But I was becoming someone, and no one expects you, no one sane expects you to be perfect,
Mm,
but we do expect that you will be improving.
mm,
So you're gonna make a mistake, you're gonna learn from it, and hopefully you will not make that same mistake twice. You will have learned from it. And I think the last thing that I would say is make sure that the people that you surround yourself with have something to lose, right? You don't wanna be taking
mm,
a whole lot of chances and doing a whole lot of crazy things because 'cause you're with somebody who doesn't really have any attachment to or ambition to anything. I say that to all my mentees.
mm. I like that.
I tell young
Danielle?
people, take my advice and ignore my advice. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is your journey. This is your life. You will not get a redo. Bet on you every single time. Move
Mm,
across the country.
that
Spend a
on
junior
me.
year abroad. Take those risks, um, because in the end, you're the only person who has to live with those decisions. And sometimes, my advice is wrong, right? Wrong for you and the direction that you're trying to take your life in. So always bet on yourself. And, like Ngozi bet on herself to found her organization.
Mhm.
And, invest in yourself.
Mhm.
Pick you every single time.
Mhm.
Choose you. I
Sometimes
love
we're
that.
trying to please our parents, please him, whoever him is. Um,
Mhm. Or
Pick
her,
yourself
or whoever her,
seriously.
or whoever she
Her
is.
or
Whoever they
them,
are.
right? We want to be inclusive. Thank you. Whoever the they is, um, love them if you can, but always choose yourself, and you won't go
Mhm.
wrong.
Mhm. I love that. I love that.
So shout out to Zaneta, for this invitation to have us have this conversation for Black History Month. Check out El Barrio Firehouse, amazing classes, digital classes. If you have any interest in video production, doing your own show, all kinds of resources, they are thebomb.com. So we definitely want to support them and get some clothes at Custom Collaborative, volunteer at the New York Urban League, and
Yay.
volunteer with Oliver Scholars as well. There's a whole new generation coming up who need our support, our love, and
Mhm.
our encouragement. And the children are not the future, they're the now. So
Right. Right.
definitely support them
Absolutely.
while you can.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been really great. Really glad to be in conversation with you too.
Yeah, this is
Absolutely.
fun.
The conversation continues.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.